Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Ms. Stansbury for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to welcome and thank all of our witnesses for being here today. Obviously, our Inspector Generals play a vital role in ensuring the oversight of our federal agencies, and I want to thank all of you as well as your staff for the important work that you do. I also want to take this opportunity to thank all of our active duty military and veterans who served bravely in Afghanistan and continued to serve our country. And, you know, I want to just acknowledge the comments of the previous speaker here. There's no question that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was chaotic, it was terrifying, it was violent, it was difficult, and the loss of those 13 service members can never be replaced. They paid the ultimate sacrifice for their service on behalf of our country. And we should be honoring their memory here today in this committee hearing. But I want to also acknowledge that the American mission in evacuating both our service members, American citizens, as well as our allies in Afghanistan was not in vain. In fact, in those final days, we were able to evacuate 124,000 US citizens and other nationals who were allies to the United States. And I want to say, as a New Mexican, I represent New Mexico's 1st Congressional District. We personally saw the brave service of our service members in helping with the evacuation efforts. In New Mexico, Holloman Air Force Base was one of the 6 designated sites where evacuees were sent when they came to the United States. And I personally had the opportunity to go down and visit not only with the evacuees as they were arriving on our shores, but also the hundreds, literally hundreds of service members, mostly reservists, air women and airmen, National Guards, who volunteered to go help with the evacuation mission because they understood after 20 years of being involved in this conflict that the Afghan allies who were being evacuated had stood bravely with our American troops on the ground, and that our mission and responsibility as we were pulling out of Afghanistan was to ensure that those allies were able to get out and their families were able to get to safety. So I do want to acknowledge that those efforts were not in vain, and to acknowledge the lives that were lost. But I also think it's really important that we set the record straight on really the path that got us into this mess and those final chaotic days. And so, Mr. Storch, I know you've been asked many of these questions already, but I just really want to be clear about the path that got us to the final days of the evacuation. So first of all, is it not true that President Trump entered into negotiations directly with the Taliban in February of 2020? And isn't it true? Thank you. And isn't it true that over the course of those negotiations and the agreements that the Trump administration had with the Taliban directly, they were negotiating directly with the Taliban, it included an agreement for a rapid drawdown of the troops who were stationed in that region?
Yes, and I should say all of this is based on our lead IG reporting. We've reported on this.
Right. And so it was the Trump administration who set the wheels into motion to actually rapidly draw down the troops and did so in direct negotiation with the Taliban. And yet, even though those agreements were put into place in 2020, there were a series of agreements on the side of the Taliban regarding their behavior with respect to the international community, those who remained in country, and the United States, which ultimately the Trump administration did not hold the Taliban accountable for. Is that correct?
We've reported out on the back and forth on all this. Yes, ma'am.
Exactly. So it was President Trump who failed to actually ensure that the Taliban upheld their portion of the agreement before agreeing to rapidly remove American troops, putting our troops at risk in those final days. And Ms. Angarella, these actions ultimately left our Afghan communities vulnerable and also led to the collapse of the humanitarian assistance infrastructure that was in country at the time. Is that not correct?
It certainly increased the challenges for delivering the humanitarian assistance, yes.
So I just want to be clear you know, in the final days of the American pullout from the war in Afghanistan, it's clear, and Mr. Sopko, you stated this yourself, that the Trump administration, quote, sold out the Afghan government. Mr. Sopko, did you state those words?
I think that's quoted from somebody else. I don't think I said that, but I think it's in our report.
So it's in your report. So it's really crucial that we're clear about what happened in those final days and that it was the previous administration who set things into motion. And finally, I know I'm out of time here, but I do want to acknowledge once again our brave service members who have not only continued to serve and help those evacuees and Americans who are continuing to work on these issues, but as well as our aid workers and international community. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.